I'm a climate scientist from Belgium and formerly IPCC Vice Chair, and I'm on the advisory board of Friendship, which is organizing this important event. And we're going to talk this afternoon about the very important issue of loss and damage. Listening to testimonies and listening about very concrete testimonies from the terrain, both in Bangladesh and in Belgium, actually. And we're going also to hear about an element of solution, an example of solution that Friendship is showing in Bangladesh in the restoration of mangroves. And this event will start. We will start by listening to the first speaker of this event, who will be Her Royal Highness Princess Esmeralda of Belgium, who is chair of Friendship Belgium, a journalist, a writer, a very committed environmentalist. I won't read the entire CV of the princess, because I think what she has to say and what other speakers have to say is more important than long biographies. I just maybe want to say a very few words at the beginning before giving the floor to the princess. You know, the scientific advisor of the former science advisor of President Obama, John Holdren, was a physicist as well, once said, when he was president of the American Association for the Advancement of Science, AAAS, who is publishing the very well-known magazine Science, speaking about climate change, he said, we basically have three choices: mitigation, adaptation, and suffering. We're going to do some of each, he said. The question is what the mix will be. The more mitigation we do, the less adaptation will be required, and the less suffering there will be. We know, because there have been so many reports over the last decades and also over the last few days, that there is a huge gap between what was needed in terms of mitigation. There's also a huge gap between what was needed and what is needed today in terms of adaptation and what is happening really. And therefore, unfortunately, there's a lot of suffering. And loss and damage is exactly about that. Is everything that is lost, whether in terms of human lives, of course, but also infrastructure, culture, homes, ecosystems. And of course, since these losses are becoming more and more important, well, this problem needs to be addressed more and more specifically. And I really hope that this conference will address this issue properly. But now it's time to listen to Princess Esmeralda, chair of Friendship Belgium, to really open this event. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor, and good afternoon, everybody. I remember last year in Glasgow, we did an event in the Benelux Pavilion, and thank you again to welcome us this year. And since then, what has happened? Well, we can see that the climate crisis is really all around us. We have witnessed during the whole year floods in Pakistan, taking the lives of so many, drought in Africa, which is threatening millions of people about hunger. Even events in our Europe where the temperature is so high and so abnormal. We have had the hottest month in October. And actually, there was a study recently saying that Europe is warming twice as fast as the rest of the world. Arctic is even more, as we know, is 3 times ahead, which has incredible consequence. Recently, The Economist, the British magazine, had a cover saying, "Say goodbye to 1.5." Can you imagine what it means for many countries in the global south? The islands of the Pacific, it's a matter of survival. A country like Bangladesh, which has so little meters above water, it's also a question of survival. I remember in 2015, before the COP, the little islands of the Pacific had a slogan saying 1.5 to stay alive. Do you know what the actual slogan is? 1.5, we might survive. So for me, the climate crisis and the ecological crisis has always been, above all, a question of human rights, a question of justice. Obviously, for the global south, because they are suffering the climate change, which they have absolutely no responsibility or so little about it. But it's also about justice for the most vulnerable community, for women around the world, for children. In our country, for the lowest income, it's always about justice. And that's why it's so important, this conference, as Professor Vanni Purcell said, about loss and damages, the taboo which have gone for so many COP. And maybe we can address this time, which would be incredible. When I talk about islands of the Pacific, we have to remember that, for example, again in 2015, the president of Kiribati had bought lands in Fiji because he said, my people will have to migrate with dignity. Who wants to leave its own country? Nobody. Nobody. And we know that that will be a problem for so many people around the world. They are forecasting millions of climate refugees. And nowhere else than in Bangladesh do we know that, because people have to migrate all the time from one shah to another, and they have adapted to that. So I just want to say a word about the Blue Mangrove Fund that Friendship has launched, which is really a program trying to address both mitigation, because we know that mangrove are the best trees for carbon capture, but also for adaptation because of its role against coastal erosion. Also, it's a fantastic tool for local communities because we know that mangroves increase biodiversity, of course, and brings livelihood to all those communities. And again, it's absolutely central that local communities are part of any project, which is what Friendship does. Otherwise, it's not.
Hello, I'm Benjamin from Belgium. I'm Benjamin from Belgium. I just recently turned 16 years old. I'm very grateful to Princess Esmeralda for inviting me to come speak here. And I would like to tell you a personal story, a personal about me and an amazing girl, Rosa. I met Rosa at a summer camp in July 2021. At the time, Rosa was 15 and I was 14. Right away, me and Rosa became really good friends, even though we came from completely different backgrounds. We talked a lot about how we were going to change the world for the better, how we were going to do it better than our parents, do everything to change the world for the better. She told me about her plans, about how she was going to do better. I think we connected so quickly because we wanted the same things. But it wasn't all serious, of course. Rosa would jump out of her window at night to go dance in the fields around our campsites in the moonlight. I played my bass or my harmonica and Rosa sang. We made plans to meet up in a park, to take our bikes and go meet up with friends and just be young, have fun, laughing and discussing how we were going to change the world. Rosa and I together. On July the 14th, it was raining, but we didn't care. We were happy. In our own little world, completely isolated, we carried on with our activities. Making plans, doing better as our parents, laughing, singing, dancing. At the end of the afternoon, the water level of the stream close to the place we were sleeping was starting to rise. We could see the water swelling and swelling. We were completely surprised and didn't realize that was happening. We had to get higher up. And I don't know how it happened. We were standing there wondering how to get higher up with a few friends, and Rosa was standing a few meters from me and she was taken by the water. I didn't think. I ran towards the water and jumped into it right next to Rosa. I held Rosa. The water was no longer water, but a raging brown monster that was dragging us along with her. I held Rosa with one arm, and I tried to grab anything I could find with the other arm. But all the trees were wet, I couldn't grab them. And don't ask me how long, but we were dragged with the water, and suddenly we went underwater. And after a while, I got struck by some kind of thing that was sticking from the banks of the river, and I smashed into it with one arm, and I was still holding Rosa with the other arm, but I couldn't hold on anymore. The water was too strong and she slipped out of my hands. I crawled out of the water, but I didn't see her anymore. 3 days later, 7 kilometers further, she was found against the fence of a farmer with her blue t-shirt and her red-dyed hair. Rosa, the climate activist who is going to change the world with me. The climate activist that died of climate change. The weeks and months after Rosa's accident were hell for me. I couldn't function anymore. Thousands of questions were raging through my head, and I didn't know what to do. I just couldn't accept that my friend Rosa, that she died of climate change. I more or less didn't leave my room anymore. But after a while, I asked myself one simple question. What side am I on? I'm on Rosa's side. I'm still on Rosa's side. She's standing here beside me even though you can't see her. I want to be part of the solution. And you know what Rosa would do? Rosa would fight. Rosa would work together and do everything she could to change the world, to fix climate change and all the other crises. So we need to keep going. Join us and fight against this crisis. I thought back to a night that changed my life. It was October 2019. I was 12 years old and had already been taking part in a lot of climate demonstrations. And that night my mom took me to see a talk by Kumi Naidoo, the South African activist. He talked about when he was young, he lived in South Africa, and he fought against the apartheid. And later on he became the director of Greenpeace, and he told me that we should keep fighting, especially young people, because we can change the world. We can change the future. So in September, 2 months after the accident, I asked Rosa's parents if I could set up an action for Rosa, climate justice for Rosa, and they agreed. So I talked to all of Rosa's friends from her school and from her dance school, from everywhere, and we decided to try to make a big action, and we did. On 10 October, it was the big climate march, and we were all dressed in red with signs for climate justice for Rosa. We had this big banner and it said, "Politicians die of old age, Rosa died of climate change." A life lost is a life lost. Be it in Belgium, in Kenya, in Afghanistan, in Bangladesh, the human tragedy behind it is the same. A dead child, a dead sibling, a dead friend, a missed one will be mourned all over the world. We need to fight for our lives and we need to fight for the lives of future generations. The COP26 was approaching. I felt completely powerless. I could think of only one person who might help. So I contacted Queen Ido again, because I wrote mails to all the Belgian ministers and no one answered. So I contacted him, and within a matter of hours he answered, and he said, "Ben, you need to keep going. You can change the world. We're going to change it together." So I thought to myself, this is crazy. This very famous climate activist, human rights activist, immediately responded, but the politicians, my politicians of my country, they didn't answer. So I started to even harder take action, and I haven't stopped since then. And by the way, it's also Queen Ido who introduced me to Princess Esmeralda, so it's awesome. So it's really cool. And that's what I want you all to take away from this. We activists, across generations, across borders, can help each other. We can encourage each other, stand side by side, and fight this crisis. To tell you the truth, I know very little about what's happening in Bangladesh. I, of course, read all the news articles. But I think we should I want to talk to the people who are affected by climate change. I want to meet them. I want to meet the humans behind the news articles, because we all need to work together. I'm a firm believer that if you make this monumental climate crisis, that we should give it names. Names of people displaced, names of lives lost. We can fight harder. The climate crisis is not a theory in percentage of numbers. It's a human crisis involving real people, and I think we should show that to the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Benjamin, and thank you for your testimony, and thank you for reminding us that we're all, in a sense, we're all the same on this planet. All human lives are important, whether they are in Belgium, in Bangladesh, or Africa, or in any other place on the planet. Now, we're going to see a short video now produced by Friendship, and if we could see that, and then after that video, we will invite the panelists to sit here and have, I hope, an interesting discussion.
এই তো এখানে আমাদের বাড়ি ছিল, আমি পরিবার এখানে বসবাস করতাম। এখানে জমি ছিল, বাড়ি ছিল, কর্মস্থান ছিল, আমাদের মাছ ছিল, স্কুল ছিল, খেলার মাছ ছিল, সব বাড়িতে চলে গেছিল। তারপরে ভাঙিয়ে ছিল সবাই এই জায়গায় কে কোথায় চলে গেল তাও সাথে দেখা হলো না। এখন যার মতো যেখানে আছে সেইভাবে চলে কিনলে খাইতেছি। এই তো এখন সব নদী পানি, এই ভাঙ্গে ছিল, এখন বালি আর বালি খরচ করেছে। এইখানে পানি ছিল, এখন বহু পানি, এটা বসতই ছিল। বন্যার সময় আবার নাক পর্যন্ত তোলা যায়। এই অষ্টশী বন্যার থেকে 19টা টানা দিয়ে আসছি, এখন বর্তমানে 19 টানা আসছি। এটা দেখেন আবাদ করাও চলতেছে না, আবাদ করাও যায় না। এখন কি করে খাবো? আমাদের শহরের লোকের খুব দুর্ভিক্ষ চলে গেছে। এখন মনে করেন যে বন্যারও কোনো ঠিক নাই, আমাদের কোনো ঠিক নাই। এটা তো বন্যার যে দিন ওগুলো বেড়েছিল, আমার ফের কখন বন্যা আসে, আমাদের কোনো কাজেরও মিল নাই। একটা ফসল যে ফালাই, ফসল ফেলা কোনো শান্তি পাই না। ওই ফসল ফেলাই বন্যা এসে ওই ফসল ধুয়ে নিয়ে যায়, ফসল খাওয়া যায়। এইগুলো আমরা এখন কোনো কাজ করতে শান্তি পাই না। যখন যেটা পাই তখন সেটাই কাজ করে চলতেছি, আর কি চলবে। আমাদের কোনো কাজেরও মিল নাই, কোনো বন্যারও মিল নাই, কোনো কাজেরও মিল নাই। আমাদের যেভাবে আমরা চালাই এখন এইভাবে চলতে হয়।
শ্বশুরবাড়িতে 12 বছর ধরে আছে, 12 বছর বিয়ে হয়েছে। তো প্রথমে বিয়ের 2 বছর পর থেকে তারপরে আমাদের ভিতরে একটা বাচ্চা নেওয়ার প্রিপারেশন তৈরি হলো। তারপরে সেখানে মতো পাস করে কনসেপ্ট করছে প্রথমবার, সেভাবে অবসর হলো। তখন তো খুব দুশ্চিন্তার ভিতরে আছি। তারপরে গ্রামের ডাক্তার দেখায়, তারপরে এইভাবে আরও 2বার কনসেপ্ট করছি, 2বারই অবসর, 3বার অবসর নিচ্ছে। তারপর তখন তো খুব দুশ্চিন্তার ভিতরে সাইড থেকে বিভিন্ন মানুষের বিভিন্ন কথাবার্তা শুনতে হয়। আবার ভালো কথা অনেকে বলে, বোঝানোর কথা অনেক রকম শুনছি। কিন্তু ভীষণ খারাপ লাগছে, কি বলবো। তো নিজের বাচ্চাদের সেটা তো কষ্ট, আবার মানুষের এই কটু কথার জন্য অনেক খারাপ লাগছে। সবগুলো নিজে সহ্য করতে হয়েছে। তারপরে সেভাবে আর্থিক অনটনের কারণে তো ভালো ডাক্তারও দেখাতে পারিনি, ডাক্তারের পরামর্শ নিতে পারিনি। এক সময় যে এফসিএম কাছ থেকে ফ্রান্সের ডাক্তারের কাছে সংবাদ পেলাম একটা সময়। তারপরে দেখি সেখানে একটু দেখা যায় কী হয়। আঁকার কাছে যেতাম চিকিৎসা নিতে, আঁকা তো সব কিছু জানলো, আমার কাছে শুনলো, সমস্যার কথা বলো। তারপর সে কোনখানটা খাই আমরা এটাও শুনলো, কোনখানে খাওয়ার জন্য ব্যবহার করি। আর আমাদের আশেপাশে সবই তো লবণাক্ত পানি, সেটা বললাম যে আমাদের হালকা লবণাক্ত পানি খেতে হয়। এখন উনি তো বললেন যে লবণাক্ত পানির জন্য সমস্যাটা হতেও পারে, তা আপনি একটু ফ্রেন্ডশিপের ওয়াটার প্লানের পানি পান করে দেখেন কী হয়। সেখান থেকে ওয়াটার প্লানের পানি পান করে, আর চেকআপের মাধ্যমে প্রথমটা ধরা পড়ছিল যে হাই প্রেশার, সেখান থেকে পানি পান করি আর আবার সেবার পদ্ধতি চলছে কিছুদিন। এখন থেকে চিকিৎসা নিয়মিত চিকিৎসা নিয়েছি, চলার পরে 4বার আবার কনসেপ্ট করছি কিছুদিন পরে। চতুর্থবারে সাকসেসফুল বাচ্চা হয়েছে, ছেলে বাচ্চা। এইটা তো আমার জীবনের বড় পাওয়া, এই জন্য ডাক্তারের কাছে ফ্রেন্ডশিপের কাছে আমি চিরকৃতজ্ঞ। কারণ আমার আর্থিক অনটনের কারণে হয়তো আমি বড় চিকিৎসা নিতে পারতাম না। এখন থেকে আল্লাহ সাকসেসফুল করেছে, এটাই।
নদী এলাকার একখানে তো আর বসবাস করা যায় না। এক সারে কোন মনে করেন আরেক সারে কোন আরেক সারে, এইভাবে আমার জায়গা নাই, আমি মাসের বাড়িতে থাকি, বেড়া নিজের জায়গা নেই। ওই স্যার কত বছর হারলে তাদের যে ভাঙলো, আস্তে আস্তে মনে করেন ভাঙবে, বেরাম ফুবের বেরাম মনে করেন উঠে যায়, আস্তে আস্তে ভাঙলো, তাদের ফেরে যে সারে এলাম। আগে বন্যা গেছিলাম আর পশ্চিম সারে গেছিলাম, বেশি জীবন হয়েছিল। তিল পাহা তিল মিশে ভেঙে গেল পশ্চিমে। এই মনে করেন ফেরে যে পশ্চিম যাইলেন না, আমরা গাড়ি নিলাম, এই সময়টা মেলা দূরে আসছিল নদী। ফের দেখেন আস্তে আস্তে যে মনে করেন এবার কার কাছে থাকা যাবে, সামনে শুন ফেরা মনে করেন কোন হয়ে যান আল্লাহ জানে। তাছাড়া ওই নামা বাড়িতে থাকা গেল কি মনে করেন গড়ে এই ফুটি পানি, গড়ে এই ফুটি পানি, দুয়ারে এই ফুটি, ওই পানি থাকা গেল সে ইচ্ছা করে নলি হারে তাও থাকা যায় না, গয়না গেনা হাতটা ফেলবায়।
Thank you very much. So we're going to sit now in the panel. The panelists, and while they move to the seats here, I'd like to apologize on behalf of Salim Haq, who was due to co-animate this session, but I'm told he will join us at the end. Wonderful. So I will introduce him when he's there. Please, Princess Esmeralda, Sandrine Dixon de Clèves, co-president of the Club de Rome, advisor to the European Commission, expert on low carbon economy and sustainability solution, and Runa Khan, the founder and executive director of Friendship. Of course, the biographies of everyone here is much longer, but I think it's more important that we keep time for the discussion and also for the dialogue with you in the room. But before opening for the floor to questions from the floor, I'd like to ask first a question, if I find it back, to Sandrine Dixon de Clèves, the co-chair of the co-president of the Club of Rome, and ask her to react first to what she heard, to what she saw, and share her views about what has been said up to now. Please, Sandrine.
Thank you, Jean-Pascal, and it's a real pleasure for me to be here. And first of all, to thank Runa and her incredible leadership and the work of Friendship and what Friendship is doing for communities who are really trying to protect our lives as well as their own through mangroves. So I'd like to thank you for that, Runa. I also want to thank Ben. I think that your tale is so incredibly moving, Ben, and it takes a lot of courage to share it with others. And yes, Rosa is definitely with you, supporting you in your challenges of trying to convey that pain that you so felt. This morning I was also with another young woman who said something very similar but in a different way. Sophie from Uganda explained how her childhood was not an easy childhood as a slum dweller. How all the flooding that continuously hit her home and her community made her a direct victim from the moment that she was born. And what I'm bringing home to all of us today on this very important day of these testimonies is to recognize that we understand the pain is now hitting many more people. That we have to take responsibility, all of us, for communicating exactly what you've just done, Ben, which is we are all connected. So my reflection, Jean-Pascal, is not only about what Friendship is doing, but what friendship actually means as a word. Because it means that we collectively have to be real friends. You have been a friend and more to Rosa, whether she's with you physically or not. We must be friends to each other. Myself and Princess Esmeralda in Belgium supporting your communities. But we must also realize that we have to bring forward, if we are true friends, both the pain and the solutions. So let me get to the solutions. We published a book recently at the Club of Rome called Earth for All, A Survival Guide for Humanity. It is based on the system dynamic modeling that has made the Club of Rome so famous in its original publication 50 years ago in The Limits to Growth. Now, why do I bring this up in this context? Because even though we're working with the Potsdam Institute and Johan Rockström, chief scientist of the Potsdam Institute and what I call a real climate rock star, we have seen through all of our system dynamic modeling, all of our work, that it is the social tipping points, it is the poverty, the inequality, and the lack of empowerment that will be our greatest barriers to actually fight the climate crisis. So when we think about the incredible work of the mangrove communities, all the work that you have done, when we think about that as a solution, we have to remember that it is both a solution around decarbonization and a solution of building real communities and lifting them out of poverty and out of inequality. That will then ensure that low-income economies, those people, the most vulnerable that are on the front lines to the clear risks from climate change, are protected. That is why friendship is so important, because it is both creating those relationships between Europe, the rest of the world, together through funding clear projects, but also, just in the word, opening up our consciousness to understand that real friendship is what Ben is doing. It's what Sophie is doing in Uganda as a young woman. By the way, 78% of the Ghanaian population is youth under 30. Recognizing the voice and the incredible support that youth bring to the economy, as well as all of us. So I just wanted to make those reflections and to bring the reality check back to our lives as we sit here in the rat race of the COP process, that it builds on us as storytellers, as actors in this global economy to really shift today. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandrine. You see you have a public, supportive public. I'd like now to turn to Princess Esmeralda for a minute. The issue of loss and damage has been very much finally on the agenda and is in the minds of many participants of this COP. And still, it has taken such a long time to be heard by developed countries, and it's only starting to be heard by developed countries, or by so-called developed countries. So how do you see this question? How do you see progress around the question of loss and damage could take place, and how could developed countries maybe understand better the importance of really addressing their responsibilities around the loss and damage question?
Well, we know obviously that loss and damage has been a taboo because we are talking of money. And it was first put on the agenda of the COP in Paris, but with the specific mention that it would not be compensated by the rich countries. So we know where the problem is. It's exactly the same as when we talk about reparation for colonial power impact on the global south. There's always a problem there because we are talking about money. But as we mentioned before, also how do you calculate all the non-economical damage? That's it. So to reply to your question, Professor, I think that we need the voice of the young people who are really active in this domain. We need the voice of all the impacted countries of the world. And it's coming. Finally, I think we can hear that. We can hear their voice. And maybe we can start thinking, let's stop paying the polluter and let's give voice and money to the people who are suffering.
Thank you very much. I'd like now to turn to Rona Khan, the founder of Friendship. And Princess Esmeralda just mentioned about the importance of non-economic loss and damage as well. There's so many other aspects than just things which can be valued on the financial markets, such as loss of life, health, territory, issues such as the one which was evoked in the video we have just seen. Friendship, which you have found, has been addressing those issues for 20 years actually. This is the 20 years anniversary. We should celebrate that. And could you tell us what we can learn from your experience in this context, and what still needs to be done?
Thank you very much, Professor, and thank you, and I'm really, really happy to be here with all of you. And Ben, I'm sorry that you had to understand this pain so early in your life. I just hope that one does not have to learn so much at such a young age. But this is where a country like Bangladesh, we are in a state where the line between life and death is very, very fragile. I have seen, I was on one of our hospital ships. It was the floods. This child coming in just dropped into the water and taken away by the floods. We sent lifeboats after her, we sent people after her. We couldn't find her, she was out, she was gone. Reality after reality like this is what we have been seeing and what we have been going through. And therefore, preparedness is really the key, you know, of ensuring that we know what happens. Today I heard, in spite of having 50% of predictability of disasters, we have only 1% of funding towards that. How is this going to work? You know, we were again discussing this morning, so modality of COP, we need to change this because 27 years, yeah, third time actually for us here, and 27 years, Professor, you have been part of this also. We need to change this. Have you ever had a COP in a country which is actually facing disaster? Where you're standing at the COP and you don't know what is happening outside. The storms, the land breaks, we don't know. And we are here making the discussion. Let's take the people, let's go there. We'll see, you know, how it feels. You know, the stories that we've got, you know, for, I don't know, mitigation, adaptation, it's required. Loss and damage is required. It's not you cannot spend lives with blame games, but we need to make decisions today. We need to ensure that the blame games, it's a way of working, but we are beyond that. We are past that. So I think what friendship has been doing over the last 20 years, it's one solution. But who looks at it anymore? Who looks at it? We are so caught with pilotitis and piloting. You know, mitigation, it's, in a sense, we already have the scientific data. Anybody with sense now has to be on board. Otherwise, you're not, you know, that there's something difficult there. I mean, to understand if somebody is not on board. Something which is lost in a capital is easy to rebuild. Something which is lost in terms of values, child education, breakages of society, suffering, inaccessibility due to loss and damage, these are things which are difficult. And anything difficult, somehow, people don't like addressing. We like talking about it, but we don't address it. And I think this shift needs to change. We need to think atypically. We need to go beyond it. Have solutions. There's so many solutions. And at the end of the day, the solutions, you know, it's easy to predict, to have mitigation solutions, because it's a predictable thing. As soon as you mentioned, Sandrine, the humane human aspect comes in, the social aspect comes in, people come in, it becomes unpredictable. So you're always in a flux with the solutions. And I think this also needs to be deeply understood and dealt with, you know, in that light. So, thank you.
Thank you, Rona. Thank you very much. Benjamin, if I may ask, you said at the beginning that you didn't know much about the situation in Bangladesh before, so you now know at least a little more. I mean, how do you see the comparison between what you know a little bit about what is happening in Bangladesh and what you experienced? What are the commonalities, and would it change the way you will orient your climate activism?
So I think what's happening in Bangladesh and what happened in Belgium, it's both caused by the same problem, climate change. It's the same crisis, and it really shows that climate change is here, it's all over the world, all over Earth, and that we should all fight together because we're all impacted by it. And of course, in the south more than in the north, but like climate change is at this point that it's everywhere. So we all need to fight together to make it stop, to try to prevent other people like Rosa and like the 1,000 others who have already died from dying. We need to protect our future. And I really look forward to talking to a lot of activists from the Global South and to work together, because we really need each other to change the world, and we will change the world. We will save our future. I'm really hopeful, and I just think we all should work together, because we're all impacted by the same crisis, and we'll fix it together.
Thank you, Benjamin. Thank you very much. I'd like to come back to Sandrine before you leave, because I know you have to leave very soon. And Sandrine, you have worked a lot with business, right? In your career, you advise business on how to become greener and avoid greenwashing and that kind of things. And I wanted to ask you, what do you think about the Blue Mangrove Initiative, and how possibly some funds from the private sector could flow in the direction of such an initiative? From your experience and
I think that the Blue Mangrove is the treasure trove that has not yet actually been properly explored in terms of compensating, obviously, for emissions. Now, we have to be very careful around how we offset and how we address the offsetting scenarios. We know that this is a very complex set of feedback loops that we need to think through. But what I'm seeing is that the private sector, and I had the pleasure of facilitating the high leaders conversations at the summit on Monday and also on Tuesday on forestry and land use. And when you come back to forestry, many private sector investments are now being actually, we have a very pestering fly that is coming and sitting on us. So many representatives from the private sector have now understood the importance of forests. In fact, they're now committing to shifting billions of dollars into stopping deforestation and enhancing reforestation. Not enough has been done in understanding the role of our seas, of our waterways, and of our mangroves. The blue solutions are still the ones that we have not tapped into enough. And we do need to work with the private sector to enhance their knowledge of the incredible gains that we get both from the community in terms of the social implications and the inequality implications, and bringing obviously finance into communities, but also the emission reduction gains that we get from actually ensuring that we plant more mangroves and that we keep the mangroves that we currently have. So I do think there is a knowledge gap in the private sector to understand that this is such a key solution, and that we need to really bridge that knowledge gap, and I think Runa's work is so important in that area.
Please, I think
Thank you
Runa
very
would like
much.
to
I'll
add-
just
yes.
add something, Sandrine, to what you've said. Absolutely knowledge gap. So we have you know, a campaign on 50 cents for a mangrove plant. How does that work? Do you really think 50 cents is going to work for a mangrove plant? No. Because in a country as densely populated as Bangladesh, every time you want to plant a mangrove tree, or any tree for that matter, you are disrupting the whole community to be able to do that, because people are living off that land. Therefore, so 50 cents for the mangrove and $3.50 for the community. The whole process of community being able to ensure the continuation of the mangroves, preservation, to be able to ensure that the mangroves are not eaten away by the goats, to ensure that due to the protection, that one 50-cent tree actually allows another 50 trees, the seedlings to come in and grow. You see, it's a whole process, and this needs to be understood. I mean, for us, that it doesn't. It's far beyond just planting a tree. So yesterday we had one lady who had done an assessment, and she said, we did this scientific assessment for you, and we really found that it was very well done. But seeing it 5 years ago, I was thinking, is it really going to work? Is it really going to work? But because we know friendship and we trusted it, says I went back the other day and I could not believe what I saw. Women who were going into the dense forest, for the honey, for the snakes, with the snakes and the tigers, they are now being able to earn living at their doorstep, and they're understanding that. They're already earning all this. So and plus, along with that, the World Bank had this, I was at a session, and they said that the front line of disaster prevention for cyclones are the embankments. So I had to tell them, I said, no, it's not the embankment, it's the mangroves. Mangroves is the first line, embankment is the second line. And actually, I think they have just put that into their report, that it's true. So it's so important for saving lives, for ensuring livelihood, ensuring that the communities are working together with nature to be able to have a long-term sustainability and healthy lives.
Can I, before I leave it, I apologize, because I do need to leave. I'm very sorry. I wanted to add to what you said, Runa, because one thing that's coming out of this COP, and this is supposed to be the implementation COP, is the incredible role of the frontline communities and the indigenous people. I have heard from almost every single conversation I've had with ministers and heads of state, including Macron on Monday, John Kerry, and others, many of the presidents of the Congo Basin, as well as the African presidents, all who have come to the realization that none of this will happen unless we empower the frontline communities that are protecting our mangroves, our forests, our land use. And what's interesting is, with the forestry declaration, which Princess Esmeralda and myself were very sensitive to in terms of ensuring that the 1.7 billion that was going to get given to communities and indigenous people actually did come to fruition. In the last year, since Glasgow, 20% of that money has gone directly into organizations, leadership of the indigenous people and frontline communities. We need to do the same now with mangroves. And I think we can, because the realization finally is that if we tap into the knowledge, the understanding of the situation of people on the ground, we will get this done. We will not get it done if it is scientists coming from the north necessarily, or policy leaders saying, do it our way. Let's go back to indigenous knowledge, community knowledge, to ensure that we put forward those solutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandrine. Actually, this resonates a lot with what the IPCC itself is moving towards, because in the last report, the room given to indigenous knowledge was much larger already. Still can progress, I'm sure, in the future, but it was much larger already than what had been the case in the past, and that's certainly useful, because we know that for adaptation as well as for mitigation, but mostly for adaptation, the knowledge from the local communities and the indigenous communities is extremely important. Actually, the transition between what you just said, Runa and Sandrine, and the next question I'd like to ask the Princess is very easy. Because there is one person, at least in the panel, who has been very deep in a very deep forest, and who is even about to release a wonderful movie about it, and that's Princess Esmeralda, who is about to release a movie on the Amazon forest. And the question is, given you have been so close to indigenous communities in various parts of the world, but recently in the Amazon, and also given that you are so intensely close to the defense of women's rights. How do you see the link between the question of loss and damage indigenous communities? We have already heard some comments about that, and the defense of women's rights and the general question of climate justice, of course. Please.
Well, something that Sandrine remembers from the last COP also is that many of the indigenous leaders at the forefront are women. And they often say that there is such a deep connection between what is done to Mother Earth in terms of, drilling for petrol or how do you say, or getting minerals and all that, is the same that is happening to women, because there's a lot of violence against women in those instances. So women are at the forefront. They suffer a lot because they obviously are in charge of collecting water, collecting wood for the communities. So the first impacted by the climate events, and also impacted by the loss of biodiversity because they're in charge of the livelihood of the communities. So we have a lot to learn from them. They have the solution also. They know exactly how to manage the community. And as you know, there have been many, many reports now from many NGOs and scientific publications saying that the areas managed by indigenous people in the world, whether in the Amazon, whether in the Congo Basin, when they are managed by local communities and indigenous, they are in pristine state. So that's important. 90% of the land managed by indigenous people are in good ecological state. That gives us the answer, no? That we have to work with them, learn from their knowledge, that the modern science can learn a lot from indigenous wisdom and in all the countries, and I'm sure it's the same in Bangladesh with the local communities.
Thank you very much. Rona, would you like to say a little more about the specifics of the mangrove restoration project, to share the information with everyone, maybe?
No, I was just thinking, Amdad, do you want to come and give? I have spoken a lot. So Amdad takes care of our mangroves. May I ask him to also?
Sure. Please.
Well, thank you so much. Mangroves plantation is a natural machine, for us to not only for carbon sequestration, but what a country like Bangladesh is a green embankment to save lives and reduce loss and damage. And at the same time, mangrove plantation also source of livelihood. You all learn those three stories. But the way we worked, we invested our time to learn why deforestation taking place. And then we realized the people, adjacent to the forest, they have no other option and choice because of their goats, because of their firewood, or any other things. So we invested community our time to exchange views and ideas how best we can take forward the plantation program. So that we formed community groups, and community groups identified how to proceed with the plantation, and we prepared a map and to help community people to suggest us why should we proceed for plantation. And immediate after, we community groups, actually they selected people who will be the caretaker for those whole process. And not only finished here, we engage women. Is a new concept is called cash for seed. So that when seed flows in the river, the women, those who were away from any income generating activities or away from the mainstream support, they started involving themselves, to collect seeds and prepare for nursery. We are the largest private nursery for mangroves in country. And meantime, we completed around close to 150 hectares and around several 100,000, 300,000 trees planted and more 50,000 in progress. And many more hectares we are in preparing. The whole idea, and then in between there was an instrumental we call local government. We involve local government not for ceremony, for planning and keeping them involved for each and every step, beginning from review and identify the boat station and allow people to be for fishing And in above all, the forest department, they act as a technical point person. The local forester, they help us, they conducted training for the people how to prepare seed and how to work for plantation. This is all about the whole process. The three actors, the friendship, community and local government work together and taking forward. And Bangladesh Forest Department now started realizing, because in Bangladesh till now in many other South Asian countries, forest belong to government. Hardly NGOs or private sectors can be part of this. This is very not traditional. It's very, and so that we are now demonstrated the idea, yes, local NGOs can act locally. Finally, I must tell you that is IUCN and FAO recently conducted a study for Asia and Pacific region mangrove forest. And out of 150 projects they identified friendship, they actually ranked friendship within top 20. So, IUCN are continuing working on our projects. FAO requested us, offered us, our mangrove projects will be their learning module for rest of their countries and to take mangroves movement forward. In nutshell, this is the idea. If you have any questions.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Before seeing a second and last short video and also giving you the floor for exchange with the panelists, I'd like to ask a last question to Benjamin. Benjamin, you have listened carefully to everything that has been said here. Do you still have hope about climate change? And what could give you more hope in the future?
That's a difficult question, but I think what could give you more hope?
Should hold the microphone a little closer to you.
Okay? Yes, sir. Yeah, there's a lot of noise. But what will give me more hope is that decision makers, that they would finally understand that people are dying, that people are suffering, and that they need to act. But those are things that will give me more hope. But I've been walking around here for like 2 days, and it's so amazing and hopeful to meet all these people who are trying to change the world, all these young activists and old activists, and just people that are doing their best to fight climate change. So I'm really hopeful. I'm even more hopeful than before I came here. So it's amazing to meet all these people, and I'm really looking forward to meeting so many more, because I'm staying 2 weeks, and I really think we're going to change the world. And I'm very hopeful. Rosa would have been hopeful too, I think. So that's why we need to be hopeful.
Thank you very much. With those hopeful words, honoring Rosa, of course, we are going now to see the second video about friendship and the mangrove, and then we'll have the exchange with the panel.
The Sundarbans. Fringing the Bay of Bengal in Bangladesh is the world's largest mangrove forest, a source of livelihood to millions, and more. It protects the land and its people from the effects of the changing climate, ferocity of the cyclones, and tidal waves. A provider and a protector. Friendship has planted 100+ hectares of forests on the mudflats to protect the embankments. Preparation is going on for several hundred more hectares.
Mangrove forests are the only trees, the only forests that are growing in salt water and have unique adaptations, not only to grow in this excess of salt, but also in terms of the biodiversity that we can find in mangroves. Mangroves also store lots of carbon. There is no other forest in the world, not in the tropics or in the temperate or boreal regions, that store as much carbon as mangroves, between tens and hundreds tons of carbon in the roots, in the live biomass, but also in the soil.
When there is high tide, the water is above, and it's only due to the embankment that the water is out of the land. And during low tide, the water is lower, and then the water can get out of the polder, as you call it. But the problem is when you have a high tide and you have a cyclone. Then you have, in addition to your high level, you get the high waves. And they go even perhaps over the embankment, or they just hit the embankment until it breaks. So a mangrove forest has the ability to break the forces of waves.
The Blue Mangroves Fund is a nature-based solution respecting the needs, the values, and the knowledge of the local communities. It will help restore the ecosystems and develop the local economy. So please donate, help the local communities to adapt to the climate crisis and the loss of biodiversity. It is really important.
Okay, thank you very much. May I ask the panelists to come back on the podium, and then the floor is open if you have questions. And is there a microphone who could go to the gentleman there in the back? Or otherwise, if you could maybe come here. Without a microphone, it will be difficult to hear you, I think. If you could introduce yourself and speak close to the microphone. I think it's on.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Abbas Qasim. I'm from Somalia. I work with Bago Foundation, it's a German peacebuilding organization. We work on climate security in Somalia. So the work Friendship has done so far is very, very impressive. We are facing similar problems in Somalia. Floods, we are facing a loss of biodiversity, we are facing drought as well. And this is affecting the communities at all, the rural communities in various places in Somalia. Sorry, there's too much noise happening. So when I saw the topic of mangroves plantation, I came here to learn from your project, to learn the good work you're doing in mangroves, and I connected with the gentleman. This is very important session for us because no mangroves plantation is happening in Somalia at all. It's brand new, it's fresh, we have a new ministry, and this is what we are very much interested. So I just wanted to congratulate and also share similar problems that you're facing. To the gentleman, I'm so sorry about the problems you faced, and with your loss, and the work you're doing is excellent. I would love to connect you to the activists from Somalia to exchange ideas and also encourage them to advocate for for climate change activities in Somalia. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Who wants to answer or comment in the panel? Rona, probably, or?
So I think, Ben, if you don't mind, we are going to make you also into our activists, and if we could connect you to the Bangladeshi activists also, and with Somalia, I think we can start having a larger platform, okay? I think the voices will be carried with a lot of strength. And thank you very much, and we'd be very happy to share the way we work, because the hard facts are easily transferred to organization, but it's the soft things which are so important, the way you deal with the community, the importance that you give to the community to be able to be empowered enough to be dealing with it. These are things without which something like the mangroves will not be long lasting. because you don't see immediate impact. You can't tick a box and say, we've planted 25 trees and that's it. Those 25 trees will have to last you 20 years at least. So it really needs a very deep, long-term, soft skill transfer, which if you wish, we'll be very happy to work with you on this. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Runa.
If I can add something, there is a lot of mangrove project of afforestation in the world, and many are not successful. It's not something easy to do, so I think that really the experience of friendship is very important.
Yeah, I think Benjamin would like to say something as well.
I would really love to meet all the Somalian activists and also activists from Bangladesh, because it's so important to work together. So thank you very much.
Yes, there's another question from the gentleman there.
Can you hear me? Oh,
yes.
You can hear me. I'm from the Climate Resilience Fund here in Egypt. I came in a little bit late, but I got the gist of what was happening. I wanted to ask, Egypt is at the beginning of its mangrove afforestation journey. There's an issue around whether ecologically it's the right thing to do, because Egypt is probably at its equilibrium mangrove population level now. And I wanted to ask you, did you consider whether you are over-foresting mangrove in your projects? Because we're grappling with that now. But just more broadly, are there any lessons we can learn at the beginning of our afforestation journey here, biological or community, that you can tell us about?
So it's not only in Somalia, then friendship is going to spread, but also in Egypt, maybe.
Yes, we are all on board. Thank you. So this is going to be a very interesting session, because now we are spreading. So thank you very much. So where does overforestation come in? I just want to welcome Professor Salimul Haq. Professor Haq, please, thank you very much for being able to make some time to be with us. So where is it that so what is making you feel that you are overcompensating or over afforestation? Yeah, because in a country like Bangladesh, with 170 million people, 1/4 the size of France, it is really ensuring that when climate change happens and the water level goes up, the brunt of the waves and the water level and the water going into the lands, of agriculture, all this is prevented. Front line being the mangroves. So we need to plant all along the coastal belt. There is no area which should not be. There are little humane issues. For example, in a place where you have mangroves, somebody's planting crops, so they don't want the mangroves. But here is where you need to go through a lot of awareness programs with the community. Then it could be that if you have mangroves, then you can, and with water level going up and down, you cannot access the boats. So if there's a marketplace nearby, they don't want the mangroves to be there. So there are a lot of little hidden issues. But these can easily be compensated with talks and understanding. So I don't know if I've answered your question.
We'll take one more question, and then I think it would be a pity if we couldn't hear a minute or two my friend Salim Haq, who just arrived. He had another commitment before, because what he's going to bring here is certainly very interesting as well. But we will take another question.
Did you want me to answer your question? Or no? Did you want me to answer your question? No, because you asked me a question around why did I think that you could overforest mangroves. In a country like Egypt, you can overforest mangroves because we have coral reef. And you can over-nutrify the water, and then you're competing with coral reef, which then has a double negative. So my question is, are there similar concerns in the environments where you farm? But the broader question was, what can we learn from your... But I'll hand...
Sorry, coral reefs, we only have it in one area. We are not doing mangroves there, which is right at the south of the country. So we don't do it there.
But I'm sure some more technical discussions can take place informally after this. But I believe there was a last question from the lady in the back. No? Did I misunderstand? Oh, okay. You were together asking the question. Then, really, I'd like to welcome here Professor Salim Huq, who is the director of the International Center for Climate Change and Development, professor at the Independent University of Bangladesh, and recognized as one of the top 20 global influencers on climate change policy in 2019, and I'm sure today as well. So please, Salim, could you share some of your wisdom about loss and damage and the connection with what Friendship and the Mangrove Restoration Project is doing?
Sure. Thank you very much, Jean-Pascal, and thank you, Runa, for inviting me. Apologies for not being able to be here from the beginning. I was hosting another event with 2 ministers at the Bangladesh Pavilion, and I rushed over. It's not easy to find places either, but I managed. So let me just share a couple of thoughts. Firstly, the issue of loss and damage from impacts of climate change has been something that vulnerable communities in vulnerable countries have been suffering from and wanting to discuss at the global level for a number of years. We initially had a breakthrough with the Warsaw International Mechanism on Loss and Damage, so we can talk about it, but we have been asking now for finance, and we have not been able to get that. In Glasgow, we proposed the developing countries all together to have a Glasgow facility for finance for loss and damage. We didn't get it. In the end, what they gave us, when I say they, the developed countries, they gave us what they call the Glasgow Dialogue on Finance for Loss and Damage, and the dialogue would happen for 3 years. So they proposed to talk about finance for 3 years, but not give any finance for 3 years, which was very disappointing. So now, in Sharm el-Sheikh, the developing countries again put forward an agenda item under the finance agenda, not loss and damage agenda, but finance agenda for finance for loss and damage. And I'm very, very pleased that it was accepted by all countries just 2 days ago. So that is a major breakthrough, in my opinion, to now talk about actual finance and addressing loss and damage, which has been a big gap. Now, in addressing loss and damage, there are some very good and legitimate questions that are often asked, and we need to address them. One of them being, what are the different kinds of loss and damage we're talking about? There's two big divides between the kinds of losses and damages. One are economic, when you can put a dollar value or a euro value on the loss. But then there's also a very important one, which is non-economic, and particularly ecosystems, like mangrove ecosystems. You could do some proxy economic evaluation or valuation of them, but they are really non-economic in the sense that they are much more to do with ecosystem health, human health, and so on. So we believe very strongly in promoting the idea of non-economic loss and damage. In fact, we don't even like calling it non-economic loss and damage because it just posits it as not having an economic value. We prefer to call it human and ecosystem loss and damage. Humanity, it's the people, human life lost. There's no money value on a human life lost. It's gone forever. So we need to be thinking more about the non-economic losses and damages and how we address them. And the mangrove afforestation that Runa and her colleagues in Friendship have been doing is one example of restoring a very important ecosystem of the coastal zone, not just in Bangladesh, but it's all over the world. Ecosystems are being threatened, particularly mangrove ecosystems in coastal zones. And in Bangladesh, we have been doing some very good results for involving people in the planting and in the restoration and in the protection, and with the government. Also good cooperation between the government, forestry department, and civil society and NGOs on the ground working with the local communities on community forestry, community-based afforestation. So while we still have a long way to go, this is something that we feel is particularly fruitful and what the new coinage or jargon we use of nature-based solutions. This is very much an example of what we now call nature-based solutions, but we've been doing it for some time now. And I'm very pleased to be associated with Runa and Friendship and all her colleagues. They've been doing a great job, and glad that they were able to come and share it here. I'll stop there, Jean-Pascal. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Salim. We still have 2 or 3 minutes for either last questions or comments or last interventions from the panelists, and then I'll wrap up. Any questions in the audience? Any question left? Yes, please.
Is that working?
Yes.
Working. You said some mangrove projects were not successful. You talk about mitigation and adaptation, so maybe one question for all of you. What are the good indicators to look at when you look at a mangrove project? What are the other indicators than just compensation that would be worth looking at if we are to invest in such a program?
That's for Rona, probably. Can you try to address that question?
What are the key indicators
of success?
Of success for mangrove program?
Because you said all projects were not successful. So how can you assess whether a project is successful?
Okay, now we really need to do a real study evaluation before we say that it's successful. But what is success? The mango trees have not disappeared, which is so often the case. You have thousands of plantations, thousands of trees, hundreds and thousands of trees by very large organizations, but they disappear. Number one. Number two, are the communities part of the ecosystem or not, of the growth of the trees and sustenance of the trees? Because if they are not, again they either disappear or they have the livelihood output is not clear. So they are suffering, so they take back the land again because they don't get livelihood response back. Then we have again demonstration, where demonstrations are done only for a year or two. You know, or so then again it goes away. Then you have trees which are not always of quality, which are directly mangroves. That means that it's growing in that area, but it's not giving the same, they're not mangrove trees, but somehow with siltation, forestation is being done. So it doesn't give the whole biosystem, you know, biodiversity in the. If there's anything else you'd like to say, and you want to comment, Amdad or Stefan? Yeah, Stefan, please. So we have been having these cases for so long, and we have not had actually seen one true case of real success over 7-8 years, except I think in us.
Just to comment very quickly, one indicator is the reduction of poverty. And it was clearly, I could testify from a testimony that I received in June when I was there. A woman was saying, okay, it changed our life because they have kind of doubled their revenues thanks to the resources that they can get from the mangroves. And they are all expecting to have the mangroves to protect their houses and the embankment. And that's the best key indicator. And that's not, what is not tangible is the smile and the happiness of the people seeing that and being part of the project. So that's, to me, that's the best indicator.
And wanting more, to give up their lands so that we can use it for mangroves. You know, finally, that's what they want. They give up their lands to have more mangroves.
And if I can add something, which is not technical, which is moral. Obviously, carbon offset is a very controversial subject. I work a lot with indigenous communities in the Amazon, and there it has been a disaster because it divides community, it brings corruption, it brings a lot of greenwashing, and many companies can continue to pollute. So I think that's one of the most important aspects. Community center, community benefit and no greenwashing.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think on those last words, looking at the watch, I think it's time to wrap up because there's probably another event in the same room very soon. So I will try to wrap up with a few words. I've been asked to try to summarize. It won't be a perfect summary for sure, but we start with a number of human stories. I mean, the human story of Benjamin and Rosa, the human story which we saw in the video of the farmers who had lost everything, and that woman who had tried to have a baby for years and couldn't have a baby because she was drinking polluted water, salted water, but finally, thanks to the work of friendship, was able to have a baby boy, thanks to the clean water she was finally able to drink. So human stories is the starting point. Suffering is another word that captures a lot of what has been said. Suffering, and this is of course related to the non-economic loss and damages which have been mentioned in many interventions. Losses in terms of human rights, losses in terms of women's rights, losses in terms of right for local communities and indigenous communities to have the life they want to have and develop the way they want. And these losses and damages are increasing because, as I said at the beginning, not enough mitigation, not enough adaptation was made over the last few decades. So if those needs, if those loss and damages increase, well, logically, the needs to be addressed more and more, and of course money needs to be found for that. So money is also an important summary word. The last 4 words I'd like to use here, the five last words I'd like to use here. First, the word of hope, the word that Benjamin used, and he linked it with the need for action, the need for more action. That is what he said is giving him more hope. The word justice, the word empathy, the word friendship, which captures finally a lot of those different concepts. And as Sandrine, who unfortunately has left, reminded us, it's not only about what friendship does on the ground, including, and not only, but including the mangrove restoration project, but also friendship by itself. Friendship between people, between communities, between countries, and with more friendship, I think we can change the world very much in the direction that Benjamin is hoping for. Thank you for your attention.